Hi, and welcome to the Desert Lady Diaries podcast, a weekly conversation with women who found their home in the Mojave Desert. I'm Dawn Davis, and this is episode number 37. If you're a first-time listener, welcome. And if you're a returning listener, thank you so much for coming back. If you're looking for more information about the podcast, past guests, or want to catch up on previous episodes, or just want to drop me a line, it's all at the website, desertladydiaries.com. We're on Facebook and Instagram at Desert Lady Diaries and on Twitter as Desert Lady Diary. Today I'm talking with Lizzie Schmelling, a lifelong Joshua Tree resident, an actress you may have seen in productions in the high and low desert, and a woman with a love of history. Welcome back to Desert Lady Diaries. Today I'm here with Lizzie Schmelling. She's a Joshua Tree native who spends her time performing in surrounding theaters in both the high and low deserts. As an actress and a historian, she loves the rich history her hometown has to offer at every turn. Although she plans to make acting a career, this sleepy little desert town will always be her home. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Sure. Native of Joshua Tree.
Yes.
You were born here?
Yes. I was actually born down in Rancho Mirage, but I was brought home here to Joshua Tree. And it has always been just the picturesque version of home for me. You know, not just because I grew up here, but because it's such a... you know, it's the ideal hometown, you know. It's not too big, it's not too small, and, you know, it's technically classified as a village, so I like to tell people that, hey, yeah, I grew up in a village. It's really cool. But, yeah, I mean, I grew up at the same house for 17 years before we finally moved, and it was just kind of, I had a great childhood in terms of where I grew up.
Talk to me about the village thing.
I remember my dad telling me about it when I was probably 9 or 10 years old, and we were looking at Google Maps because they just come out with like new satellite images and stuff, and we were looking at our house and our backyard and everything.
It's fun, isn't it? I love maps.
Yeah. And he told me, he goes, you know, Joshua Tree is technically classified as a village, and I'm like, well, that's cool. You know, it's like, oh, well, I grew up in the town of Joshua Tree. It's cool, you know. I grew up in the village of Joshua Tree. It gives it a more, you know, eclectic kind of feel.
Which is interesting because it kind of plays right into the people that are attracted here.
Exactly. Yeah. It's really, really cool.
So what was it like for you growing up here? So we don't have a Joshua Tree High School. So how did that whole thing go for you?
It's actually cool because I am living now within like a 10-minute driving distance of every single place I went to school growing up. So I went to Friendly Hills Elementary School, which is in Joshua Tree, and it was so much fun because it was our field trips, you know, we'd go to the national park or we'd go hiking, you know, and it was like, oh, well, this looks like my backyard, but it was almost totally different.
Right.
And you'd grow up, especially going to school and stuff, you'd go out and you'd hike and climb all over the rocks and everything.
It's just a natural thing to do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then I went to La Quintana Middle School, which is kind of on the border of Yucca Valley and Joshua Tree, and then Yucca Valley High School. And then I went to Copper Mountain College right here in Joshua Tree, too. People are surprised when they find out that there's a college in Joshua Tree.
Yeah, driving by.
Tiny little town.
And it's been there for quite a while.
Yeah, since I think it was built in the 80s. It was part of COD down in the low desert. I just graduated from there in December with my associates in history, so that's really exciting. But yeah, I think it's, I tell people I haven't been all over the place when it comes to, you know, my education, but I can drive by every single place I grew up going to. But I think that's something that not a lot of people can do. So
no, well, you've got some roots here, obviously. Yeah. Now, did your parents move here, or did they grow up here as well?
My mother actually grew up here. Both my parents did. She grew up here, I think, in the 70s when she was around 10 or 11. And then she moved to Downey when she was in her late teens, early 20s. And then my father grew up here. My grandfather was actually a very beloved teacher at 29 Junior. And both of my parents have adopted last names, and so when people come up to me in the town, they're like, oh, you're Schmelling, you know your grandpa, and I'm like, well, it's actually an adopted last name, you know, I don't have any blood relation to it, but yeah, both parents actually grew up here, and ironically, where we're living now is only about a street away from where my mom grew up as a child. Yeah, and you know, my grandpa's 10 minutes away, so it's cool that they grew up here too, and they get to see all the stuff that's changed, right, in addition to... What do
they think about all of the changes that are happening have happened, I should say.
We're on kind of the same level in that it was so quiet, especially when we were babies, my sister and I. Growing up at Joshua Tree, it was very quiet. You know, you'd go downtown and there wasn't all of this, you know, bike lane stuff and the tourist stuff. You know, it's gotten very, in a way that's really nice that people are coming here and it's getting recognized and it deserves to.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you know, it's like, I kind of wish sometimes it would go back to just the no one.
About the only time it does is like maybe the beginning of July to the, oh, that was nice. My little message is coming through. Like the beginning of July until maybe the end of August.
Yeah, yeah.
And I like to say it, that's like, I call that now, and I've been here a very short time, but I call it tumbleweed time because there aren't a lot of people here because it is so hot and it's just not conducive to hiking in the park and all that stuff. You actually have to be really careful even when it's not July.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone kind of slows down.
Right,
you know?
exactly. And it gets quiet and we can get a seat at the bar at the saloon and all that kind of stuff.
You don't have to wait 30 minutes at Crossroads to get a table.
Which I guess is nice for them too, the businesses, because they never see, you know, they see a little dip, but it's not like a total dive in business because the locals get to kind of come out and enjoy our places, whereas when it's high season, we really can't do that so much. Yeah. Let's first talk about your degree in history. Yes. What is your interest in history, and is it a specific kind of history? Did you specialize?
In a way, yeah. So I graduated actually just this December. I was there for about 2.5 years. I actually started out as a nursing major.
Oh, wow.
Because I wanted to work in a hospital and everything like that, and then I realized that my biology and chemistry skills are not as conducive
kind of like my algebra skills.
Exactly. Yeah. And then, you know, I've always loved history. There's something about it, and I was like, you know what, let's do it. Let's pursue this as a solid major. And it was probably the best decision I ever did. I learned so much more than I thought I already knew. And there's something about history. I remember my professor telling me, he goes, history is everything and everything is history. You know, you talk to someone, they're a math major. You're like, okay, well, that's history. Everything, you know, you look around the floor, you know, the buildings that are around here, you know, it's history. And so that really kind of grabbed my attention in terms of fueling the interest that was already there. For me, it's a 20th century kind of era that I like to study because so much happened in such a small period of time. Just 100 years, so many innovations in terms of technology and population changes and presidents and everything like that. And it's so many things that we still use today were invented in you know, that 100-year span. And it's an artifactual thing for me too. So objects and people especially. I love museums, so that's a big thing. So World Wars I and II and kind of that European military history is really interesting to me too. But from the artifact standpoint, it's a thing where those objects, whether it's a soldier's helmet from World War I or a piece of barbed wire fencing from a concentration camp or a flower from Woodstock, it doesn't matter where it's from, but that object is going to hold specific energies and specific, you know, emotions from that time that are so infamous that every single person you talk to in this country, they're going to know about it, even the world. And for me, if I get, especially in museums, if I get to study those objects or if I get to be in the same room as those objects, if I got to touch them, it's that history is now has such a more deep impact on myself, and I get to put my history on that object as well, and it makes me feel a little less insignificant in the grand scheme of things. That's the main reason I study it, because of so much stuff happening in such a small amount of time.
What do you think it was that sparked that interest?
I don't know. I really can't tell you. There was something, I always growing up, I would read stories and books about the 1940s and especially World War II era, you know, stuff. I don't know if it's a past life thing or I was maybe a nurse in World War II. I don't know. But, and I think that there's just something that's always been there, whether it was pushed on the back burner, and it's always been there. And for some reason, when I decided to switch my major in college, it was like, there you go. We've been waiting for that.
That's great. Yeah. How was the switch from nursing to history?
It wasn't as stressful as I thought it was going to be. It wasn't too far into the nursing. I hadn't even gotten into the program yet or anything like that. I was just doing my general education, and those were the same ones that were required for history for any major. So it was like, oh, this is my first semester, so get my general ed out of the way. And so it wasn't too hassle of a switch.
So which museums up here in this area have you been to?
Well, there's one up here in Yucca that's the High Desert Nature Museum. That's more like environmental stuff like that, which is amazing too. I remember going there on field trips as a kid. And then there's the old Schoolhouse Museum, and I've been to that one many times. And there's a few down the hill to the Palm Springs Art Museum. I actually just went to one that was very impressive in terms of artifacts, and it's called the Tolerance Education Center in Rancho Mirage, and it's kind of a small version of the Holocaust Museum in LA, and they have a lot of artifacts from Auschwitz and all the camps and everything, and it was tough, but it was really neat to see that. So that one probably so far has to be my favorite in terms of.
Well, it's interesting that you talked about the energy that's in all the objects. So for you, I would imagine, and for many other people, visiting a museum that has that sort of collection, it's not only a visual experience.
It's
an energy experience.
It can bring you to tears.
Sure.
And it's especially, even just the little antique shops here in town, in Old Town Yucca and even Joshua Tree, and those are even more interesting because you don't know where those objects, you don't know their history, you don't know where they've been. I went to an antique shop in Yucca probably a few months ago, and they had this autograph book from 1898, and it was a girl, and she was in Kansas City, Missouri, and it was like an autograph book of all these famous people of, we don't even know who they are because they were famous, in 1870s, 1880s, but it was just all this writing, and it was in like mint condition, had this green velvet cover, and I'm like, this is somebody's prized possession back in the day, and it's just sitting here on a table in this town,
right. And how did it get here?
Exactly.
Right.
And it just, I could spend hours and hours in antique stores. Yeah.
It's a lot of fun. Well, and it's very nostalgic too. Sometimes you come across things that you remember having in the kitchen or in the bedroom when you were growing up, and it's a little trip down memory lane sometimes. Yeah. So you're an actor.
Yes, I am.
And how did that get inspired?
I was in the occasional school play growing up, but my sister was really the one who started the whole kind of acting train. My grandfather was a double for Clint Eastwood for many, many years in Hollywood, so he had the knowledge and stuff of acting, and ironically, they asked my parents if they could put my sister and I in some commercials when we were babies because of our eyes and how blue they were. But my mom was like, no, I kind of want them to have a normal childhood. So as frustrating as it may get sometimes, thank you, Mom, for keeping me out as a child. We started community theater when I was around 8 years old. And my sister was 3 years older than me. So she started, her first show was High School Musical on the community theater level. And that's where I met a majority of my family and friends that I still know to this day. And I wasn't in that one because I was too young. But my first time on a community theater stage was probably, I was 10 years old, and it was Camelot. We did a production of Camelot, and there was something about being on stage in front of people and getting to play a different part and everything that was so attractive to me, and it was so, hey, this is cool, this is kind of, I think, what I should do. Even at 10 years old, having that thought was a little rare, but growing up, and it just increased, and it hasn't stopped since.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you've been in probably just about every theater that's up here, and people would be surprised to know that there are a number of them.
Yes,
or if they're not a theater, it's a theater company, if you will.
Yeah.
And then down in Palm Springs and all down there. And you're working on something new now, right?
Yes, we actually start rehearsals tonight, but it's for Sister Act, and which is, of course, most everybody knows the movie with Whoopi Goldberg.
Sure,
but the stage version it's so much fun. And I get to be with my friends again, friends and family on stage, and start a new project, and then we have another one after that. And then, it just keeps going. Yeah, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah, so. It's very exciting. Well, I think I may have told you and or Jasmine at some point, Jasmine Schaefer, who was interviewed on the podcast previously, that when I went to see Godspell at the High Desert Cultural Center, and knowing how close you and Jasmine and Scott Clinkscales are, that when you all, the three of you, had a number that you were doing, and I thought, how great is this for them, as good of friends as they are, it's probably something you'll never forget.
Exactly. And we grew up doing that. That's how we met. We see certain songs or certain shows that we're used to listen to, and we're like, remember, this is a song we sang. This is the first song we sang together. This is a song we met on, and it's been 10 years we've been doing this all together, so it's like over 10 years. So yeah, I mean, we're pretty nostalgic when it comes to theater.
Certainly. How does that work in then with your love of history? Have you found a way to kind of marry those two things, the acting and the history?
Absolutely. There's something about not only being in a time period where I can see and live within such famous theatrical performances, whether it's Patti LuPone doing her Evita performance on the Grammys just this year, which was something that is so ingrained in Broadway history and acting history that I got to see in my lifetime live. I have to pinch myself sometimes that, I get to live in the same timeline as this historic kind of...
Well, somebody, I think it was on Facebook, somebody posted something, maybe it was a video of Chorus Line, or someone was auditioning for Chorus Line, and I saw the original on Broadway of that. So I feel what you're saying. It's
we actually,
wow.
Yeah, when we did Maine last month at Plum Canyon Theater, our director, Stephanie Ely, was one of the leads on the national tour of A Chorus Line.
Wow.
So we got to work with her and kind of study the original stuff with her, and it was just, it's mind-boggling,
Yeah.
And I've worked with the original rehearsal pianist for Evita on Broadway, Stephen Smith, their resident piano player there, and
really?
it's... Again, I have to keep pitching myself that I get to work with such people that have done things.
It's pretty amazing. Now you're kind of working your way into the LA thing.
Yes. Slowly but surely.
How's that all going?
It's good. You start slow, start where you can, and especially backstage.com, Howard Chang got me hooked on it. He's like, here's what you need to do, start here, get your stuff going, and then just start doing it. It helps that I have a degree and I can work in certain places, and that'll allow me to make a living while I'm doing it.
Yeah,
but
that's very important.
Yeah, I just had my first LA audition not too long ago, and we'll see where we go. It's definitely something I want to do as a career and make a living of, because it's so near and dear to my heart, and it's my passion. Right. And I just have to start. Right,
that's all it is. It's just starting, exactly, and then just go from there and get the knowledge that you can from these directors and these musicians that have worked on these productions that can give you kind of the inside track on what to look for and how to find it and that sort of thing. That's great. Is there a plan to move to LA to fully pursue this, or?
I thought about it, and Jasmine Schaefer and I were roommates, and we were talking about either moving down to Palm Springs if we continue to work down there. I think it really depends on what happens. I can't predict the future or anything, but
sure.
I think if I were in a position where something was going to launch my career and it was going to, this is what you're going to be doing for a very long time, so you might as well move down here.
Right.
And if I had the funds to do that, of course I would.
Sure.
My sister's kind of in the same boat with me as well, but, I think it just depends. It depends on what the future brings, and in terms of Palm Springs work and LA work and who I meet and stuff, so we'll see. We'll see.
Well, that was one of my struggles when I moved here, was because I did move to LA to do the acting thing. It's turned out that most of my work is voiceover and not as much acting, although I'm doing quite a bit of acting up here, which is great. It's keeping my muscles, in tune and everything. But I struggled with that when I got pulled to move here.
Yeah.
It was very strong, and I was just mulling over in my head, well, you moved to LA to do this. What are you going to do now? And I know I can do the voiceover stuff anywhere. And then there was one night when I was driving back from Joshua Tree to LA on one of my little reconnaissance missions to make sure I wasn't just romanticizing this whole desert fantasy. Yeah. And I thought, remember when you lived in Orlando and you drove from Orlando to Tampa, 90 minutes each way to audition. You drove to Miami, 4 hours back and forth each way to audition, 6 hours each way to Atlanta. That's what it takes when you're a regional actor. Yeah. And I thought, well, this is 2.5 hours at best. I know a bunch of people in LA will let me sleep on their couch if I need to.
Yeah, exactly.
So I said, you know what? Just do it.
Yeah.
And see what happens. So it's doable.
Yeah.
I'm sure that there are a number of people who are not in that LA scene who are working and doing that thing.
Or they live on the outskirts and stuff. They don't wanna,
it's not completely impossible.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not impossible. So keep doing it.
Yes, I plan to. I certainly do.
And of course, anytime you would want to sit down and ask questions or anything about that whole thing, I'm happy to sit down and walk you through even some websites too that you can get on and things like that.
Yes,
so
the more experience,
it's my pleasure. Sure, absolutely. With that thought in mind, what is it that then keeps you here in the desert?
I have my father's blessing / curse of homesickness within me. I'd never truly left the desert, unfortunately, but I didn't go away for college. I didn't go across country for work. It's something that It's home. And I grew up, and it's a very unique and almost kind of detrimental thing, that homesickness that can kind of keep me from doing things, or it's that fear of, oh, I'm going to lose home, or, oh, I'm going to, I have to tell myself it's always going to be here, especially. And it came, when we had to move out of our childhood home, that kind of fueled it, especially for me and my dad. And it was kind of a test thing, I think, for me as well, but I can drive by at any time and see, oh, that's where I grew up. And everyone goes through it. It's not just a thing that happens to Joshua Tree kids. It's home. It'll always be home. I can drive by my schools. I can go to the park and reminisce about old field trips with people. And I've met literally everyone I know I've met here. It's a home and a love for home thing, but it's also a fear thing of moving on. But that's something that I just need to do. And
you've got some time, but don't take too long, because it goes really fast.
It does. It certainly does. Yes.
It goes really fast. For what you're seeing now here in the desert, is this the maybe biggest influx of new people that you've seen in your
from what I've seen in my mere 20 years of living here, it's definitely different. I've seen people come to the park, and I've seen people from the city come and try and get away and camping and stuff like that. But this is definitely, when they started adding all the bike lanes and everything for the tourists, I'm like, okay, this is kind of new. But like I said before, it's great that they're getting all of this recognition, and that Joshua Tree is becoming this kind of world-renowned paradise type place. It's just a little bit of that old home that's kind of being pushed aside, but it happens. And
I feel sometimes like, am I contributing to that by having moved here? Talking to a number of people, the desert has a way of sorting things out.
Absolutely.
And people may come here and say, wow, I need to move here, and I don't know, a month, 3 months, a year or two, may decide this is not for me.
Yeah. And you never know until you try. So I don't have a vendetta or this bitterness towards people that want to move here. If you want to move here, it's a beautiful place. It's a great place. If you are sick of the city, or if you are you want a fresh start on something, the desert is such a great place to start. So just bring your sunscreen. That's
right.
That's what I have to say.
What attributes do you think the desert has that effect on people?
There are little nuances. People, when they drive through here, they're like, oh, it's the desert. But I think you have to grow up here to really realize the beauty of it. We have a certain type of tree that only grows here in the world. We have these huge summer rains, and there is nothing in the world like the smell of damp creosote. Right. There's the shock when we get a huge snowstorm, rarely, but there's a stillness to it that you never see. Joshua Tree's covered in snow. It's a rare sight that it's kind of, there's all these little things that I think if people spend time here and they really experience, it's life-changing. It draws you in, and it keeps you here. And I think if a lot of people I've met that have, when I tell them I'm from Joshua Tree, they're like, oh my gosh, I love Joshua Tree. And I'm like, yeah.
I'm trying to remember if it was Portland, maybe. I think I was in Portland, and I was waiting in some ridiculously long line for some ridiculous, I think it was the salt and straw ice cream. Everyone's like, you got to do that when you go to Portland. So I'm telling you, I'm embarrassed to say I waited probably an hour in line for ice cream. By the time we got to the threshold of the door, I was best friends with the people standing in front of me. At some point, they said, oh, you're visiting, where are you from? I said, Joshua Tree. They're like, oh, I've heard of that, blah, blah, blah. And I immediately, it's like the mom that pulls up the baby pictures.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm like, well, let me show you some things.
Start bragging about it. Exactly, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
But it's a really unique and interesting place, and I feel very blessed to be here and to have discovered it and to have had the I call it the green light experience that I had from the first time I got here. 3 months later, I was living here.
Yeah.
It was just that fast. And I think that sometimes if things are not meant to be, there will be roadblock after roadblock after roadblock, and you need to pay attention to those things.
Everything for a reason.
Right. And then, but on the reverse side, when things are just full steam
when
ahead.
They're laid out in front of you.
Right.
It's like,
you need to pay attention to those things too.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really important.
Yeah.
So in your spare time,
yes,
when you're not working or when you're not driving back and forth and learning lines and going to rehearsal, what kind of things do you do in your spare time? What kind of things are you passionate about?
I mean, my sister has art. That's her big thing. She loves painting. Me personally, there's something, because I do get so busy sometimes with theater and work and school and stuff. I find it hard to spend time with my friends and stuff. So I try to do that as much as I can. I do love hockey.
Really?
I do love to watch hockey.
Oh,
yes.
wow. What's your team?
Dallas Stars.
Oh,
for sure.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Devils.
Yeah, really nice. Love it. But yeah, I mean, even if it's just kicking back and watching hockey or just spending time with my family, because, I've had a break for the winter and where I haven't had to do anything. So it's kind of like, it's nice to relax and just spend time with family and, have dinner and spend time with friends and watch a game or do this. But it's also, it can be like, okay, let's get back into it, let's get back into the grind. So.
Right. What is the grind?
Theater.
Theater. Don't call it a grind.
Day after day. It's a great... It's especially when you're doing one back to back to back to back. Last year, I think we were in
you guys were
back to back, and it was stressful. Nothing's ever easy, especially when you want to do it as a career and it's your passion. But there's something so rewarding about closing a show and you're like, well, another one in the books. You're like,
right. I find that night always very bittersweet.
Yeah.
Dang, it's over. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things I find so fascinating about whether it's a play on stage, whether it's a film, whatever kind of entertainment it is, it's typically goes like this. People who never met each other, don't know each other, suddenly come together, they create this thing, and they spend time trusting each other that everybody's going to know their lines and everybody's going to do what they're supposed to do.
Yep.
And they bring it to an audience and trust that the audience will receive it. And then as fast as it kind of formed, it's gone.
Yep.
Never to be seen again in that particular, with that particular group of people. And you know what I mean?
Yeah, I felt that way after one of my shows that I did last year. I was standing in the wings and we were waiting for the finale. And I'm like, I will never be in this position again with these people in this outfit with this show. I could do the show again 10 years later, but it's going to be completely different.
Right.
This is the last time in my life that I'm ever going to be in this position. And I do that with every show. And it's kind of like you said, it's a bittersweet thing, but at the same time, it's, what an honor to create that and to bring it to people.
Right. Well, and that's interesting that it's not only that you were aware of it in the theater setting, but to carry that out into our lives and recognize that every moment is like that.
Exactly.
There will never be another moment like this.
Yeah.
Where we are sitting across from a table doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
So to be able to live in that and recognize that is very important. And a lot of people, they're on to the next thing. Or they're not really focused on what's happening in this moment, but what do I have to do later today? Or so that's great awareness for someone of such a young age.
Yes.
It's amazing. Great. Well, I am so glad that you came here today.
Thank you. I am so happy
to talk with us. This is very exciting. And I look forward to being in another show with you, hopefully.
It's been too long. We do need to work together.
What was our last one? Dracula.
I think it was Dracula.
It was probably our first
and only.
Yeah, so we need to get Howard on that.
Absolutely. Hello.
Wait, are you doing Dialogues?
I am.
There we go. We're together.
There we go.
Although this podcast will come out after Dialogues. But anyway. That's good. Well, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for
really glad to have you.
Thanks so much for listening to the Desert Lady Diaries podcast. I want you to know how much I appreciate you taking the time to tune in. If you heard something that inspired or enlightened you, I'd love to hear about it. Send an email to desertladydiaries@gmail.com or start a discussion with other listeners at the Desert Lady Diaries Facebook page. Next week, we'll hear from Joshua Tree resident Eva Soltes and how a friendship with a well-known composer led her to Joshua Tree. If you like this podcast, I hope you'll subscribe and share it with a friend. Thanks so much for listening.